I don't have to stand in front here doing, no, I'm good here. Hi, everyone. My name is Mitchel Chuvalo. I have been a teacher, a coach, and an educator for some 30 years. Long time. I'm glad I'm having the opportunity tonight to talk to you about the power of transformation in young people and what distinguishes change from transformation and what differentiates transformation from metamorphosis. There, I got it. I think there's a formula that you can employ that will assist that change. It happened with me. It's happened to other people in my life, and it happens with students I teach every single day. So let's just go back for a second to the fact that there's 7 billion people in the world. And if we are fortunate enough and lucky enough, we all get to be an adolescent, if the conditions are right. Each one of us at that time starts to form an identity. And our identity is based on our experiences. And that's quite normal. But it's an incomplete identity, but it's a very particular identity to our own experience. And when that happens, we oftentimes come into conflict with other people who have an identity, but they don't share the same perspective that we have because we have particularized experiences and particularized identities. What happens then when those two things conflict, right? There's an angst created. There's a problem. And what we do very naturally is we turn to philosophy, and a very specific type of philosophy. That philosophy is called axiology, or value theory. And kids naturally do this all the time. Think about young kids. All the time. When this happens, they are in deep distress. And you can hear the young girl's voice right now. That's not fair. That's not fair. I should have just as much as he or she has. That's not right. That's not equal. Kids do it all the time. They're natural philosophers, which is an interesting thing because they don't quite yet have the lexicon to work out bigger problems, but there is an understanding that they will use axiology at some point in their framework to get around argumentation with other people who also have a very personalized identity. Now, my kids do this all the time. I have 2 boys, one 11 and one 13, and they argue over the PS4 all the time. You know, a PS4, for those who, all know what a PS4 is. Dad, he's been on for 20 minutes. I only got 18 minutes. Son, why are you arguing over 2 minutes? In fact, you've been arguing for the last 10 minutes over 2 minutes. In an act of generosity and kindness, wouldn't it have been better? Wouldn't that have been the better value to employ here and let your brother have that extra 2 minutes without worrying about it? No, Dad, that's not the way the world works. In fact, it is the way the world works. Because everything we do in our lives, every single thing we do, admits of a deeper value structure, a deeper value-laden act. And I can tell you that by just looking out at you tonight. We're here having a TEDx talk. TEDx obviously values people in the community coming together and talking. I think that's a good thing. The shoes I wore tonight, I think I look pretty good in these shoes. I decided, aesthetically, they look good on me. I'll make a decision to wear those. This jacket my buddy got for me, that looks fantastic. I'll put that on. Why not? Right? Everything has an underlying value structure. The food I eat tonight will say something about my value system. Transportation I take home will say something about my value system. So I'm of the belief that values guide everything we do in our lives, although my sons disagree. Now, I talked about particularization of your experience and your identity as a limiting condition, and I have to be very careful here. We want individuals with varied perspectives. We want people to have differing viewpoints. We want people to express their lives personally and very concretely as it's differentiated from other people. However, let me go back, especially because so many people have been left out of the conversation. People who have been marginalized, people of color, women, people in the LGBTQ community, people, I just saw the slide up there, which threw me off. Not yet. people who are poor, who haven't had access to education, all those people's voices have been marginalized. And I don't want to downplay the importance of listening to those voices. However, regardless of your situation, it's super important that you understand that your personal experience is a limiting condition. It's a limiting condition. And what I'm arguing for is you have to look at the world in a bigger framework. You have to see things more in their broadest scope possible. Now, that's not a new idea. A lot of philosophers have said that before. You want to will your actions to be universal, and when they become universal, you act on behalf of everyone in the world. And I think that's a fabulous thing. Now, what does that actually look like in human experience? Well, I'm going to take you back to, come on, there we go. I'm going to take you back a long time ago, before you were born, most of you, 5 years before I was born, to 1954. And imagine the town of Louisville, Kentucky in 1954. And what I want you to imagine in your mind's eye, I want you to see a young boy on a red Schwinn bike, a beautiful new red Schwinn bike. Got it for his birthday, I think. And he was riding it through the streets of Louisville, Kentucky. And he goes to a local auditorium where he goes to see a show. And he foolishly leaves his bike outside the auditorium. Comes back out after the show, and of course, the bike is gone. And he's firecracker red. He's hot. He's screaming and yelling, I'm going to whip that individual. When I catch that young person, I'm going to hit them. I'm going to punch them out. And he's going into hysterics, something that would actually serve him later in life. Someone says to him, there's a cop downstairs in the basement of the auditorium. Why don't you go talk to him? He goes downstairs, and in the basement of the auditorium is an old police officer. His name's Joe Martin. And Joe Martin says, what do you want to beat someone up for? They stole my bike. He says, well, do you know how to beat people up? Smart old cop. Do you know how to beat people up? Yeah, I'll kill him. He says, well, I run a boxing club here. Why don't you come to the boxing club and we'll teach you how to fight? So the young man the next day shows up at the boxing club and he starts to box. Wild, frantic, angered, and then all of a sudden he starts to learn how to box and put his punches together, and he becomes pretty good at it. He becomes very good at it, in fact. He wins 6 Golden Glove championships, amateur championships in Kentucky, and he's good enough to represent the United States at the Rome Olympics in 1960 in the heavyweight division. Beautiful transformation of all that anger, that misplaced anger. It gets transformed into an athletic skill. He gets to travel and see the world. I'm down to a minute 58. Ooh, I better hurry up. He gets to see the world. He becomes a local hero and brings his gold medal home to Central High School in Louisville, Kentucky. His name is Cassius Clay. Most people would know who he later became. I love that picture because it's so joyous. Everybody in the local community expressing such joy over his accomplishments. But there's another story to that picture. 1960s Kentucky, he went out with his friends to celebrate afterward, and he was refused service because he was black. And segregation in the United States was still very strong. The Jim Crow laws allowed for supposedly equal but separate public areas, like in train stations, like in restaurants. So upset was he at this, that he reportedly takes the medal from around his neck and throws it into the Ohio River. Starts reading about and becoming interested in civil rights issues, meets an individual by the name of Malcolm X, maybe the leading civil rights advocate in the time in the United States, along with Martin Luther King, and they decide to confer and become friends to the point where this individual, Cassius Clay, becomes Muhammad Ali. 4 years later, he becomes the heavyweight championship of the world, declares his being Islamic to the rest of America, and goes on to be not only a fabulous fighter, but probably the apotheosis of social justice warrior of the 20th century. the apotheosis of a social justice warrior. And that's why he was so famous and loved. He was loved not only because of his boxing, but he was also loved because of the things that he appealed to in a broader context beyond boxing. So, some of you might know, my father, also a professional fighter, fought Muhammad Ali twice. I've had an opportunity to have an audience with Muhammad Ali. And the interesting thing about Ali was that he had mentors in his life to enlarge and broaden his perspective. They gave him a wider range of thought, experience, and action. I often think I would love to have been a fly on the wall when the young Cassius Clay came into the basement and started furiously hitting the bag, and the wise old cop got him to settle down and transformed that into an athletic skill. I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall when Ali, upset about not being served in his hometown, being a second-class citizen in his own hometown after throwing away his gold medal. I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall to listen to Malcolm X talk about the injustices in American society, especially as they related to minorities. That would have been a fabulous thing, and to watch that metamorphosis happen. But my father fought with him twice. Interestingly, the two vicious fights. Muhammad called my father the toughest man he had ever fought up to that time, and they remained friends long after and up until Muhammad's death recently. And I always thought that boxing, hitting people in the head, is a strange way to make friends, but they eventually became friends. So what does this have to do with me? Like my father, I was trained to be an athlete. And I was a pretty good athlete in a multitude of sports, but the sport I loved most was football. And I became a football player at Florida State University. In fact, I was offered 6 different scholarship offers to go to the United States in the 1970s. That was pretty heady stuff for a Canadian athlete back then. And I chose Florida State University, where I had a good first year, but in the off season, I hurt myself because I was an overzealous trainer trying to live up to the reputation of my dad. I did way too much. Anyway, I hurt my knee in the off season, and it was misdiagnosed. Remember, this was the time when there were no MRIs, there were no laser surgery, and my knee was misdiagnosed. My knee injury was misdiagnosed, and I continued to train on it, such to the point where I hurt my other knee. So upset, I left Florida State University and enrolled at the University of Guelph. And at Guelph, I was initially depressed because what happened to me, the particularization of my identity and my experience was I was a failure. I was never going to live up to the athletic potential that I thought I had and that others thought I had. And I was pretty depressed for about a year. Until one day, I walked into a classroom. It's called Selected Topics in Philosophy of Education. And on the board, there was the professor, I'll talk about him in a minute, was this on the board. Remember, it was the old chalkboard. This is 1979, I think. And it says, to educate is to cause to grow. X causes Y to grow, if and only if, and to the extent that it enables a more coherently extensive range of thought, experience, and action. And that hit me like a laser. That was my metamorphosis moment. How could I get out of my own identity and view the world in a much broader context? Well, I now had a formula to do it. I didn't walk into that classroom. I limped into that classroom, and I flew home. All the way home, the concept of axiology and value kept folding into and onto each other. I became extremely excited about learning the lexicon of talking about value, and it gave my life meaning. Talking about meaning, talking about value, gave my life value. And it's a thing I don't think we do enough with children today. We allude to it, kind of, but we don't talk about it in depth, and I think it's key and critical that we do it. Just as an aside, my professor in that course, John McMurtry, still a lifelong friend of mine, probably the leading axiological scholar in the world. I was lucky enough to strike up a friendship with him. Most recently, he wrote the history of philosophy for the United Nations, for UNESCO. A mind, I had access to that mind. He gave me that confidence to get beyond my own personal experience, to get out of the angst of my particularization. He departicularized me. And he gave me a huge value system that I use every day. I see things in the broadest context, so I don't get mired in the small things in life. John is one of the lords of my life. I can still talk to him. He's my mentor. I encourage all young people to get a mentor like that, someone who has a broader range of thought, experience, and action. It's going to be key and critical to your development. He saved my life in a lot of ways, and I'm thankful to him. I can talk to him about anything. How many people do you have in life that you can talk to about anything? Nothing is taboo. I'm lucky to have that in my life. What does that mean in my everyday practice? To be able to look at the world in the broadest scope, broadest range of thought, experience, and action. To look at the world so that every action I partake in should be an action that everyone else partakes in. Well, it informs me as an educator, because kids love to talk about values. It informs me as a parent, because my kids are increasingly getting used to my talking about values. As a lover of life itself, it allows me to enjoy things on a much deeper level. But it's a difficult thing to do at times, because people get mired in their own particularist identity system, right? And I've taught at UTS here, which is a high-achieving school of great kids, thoughtful kids, but I've taught in 4 other schools. And I still lay awake at night at 3 a.m., in that 3 a.m. stillness, and I think about 5 students I've come into contact at other schools who were murdered, and 5 students that I have come in contact with, either directly or indirectly at schools, who killed someone. And I'm convinced that if they had the lexicon of value theory and axiology, if they could have thought or learned to have thought or learned to even begin to think outside their own tragic particularist vision of the world, if they could have done that, things might have been very different for them. Even in my own life, that's a picture of myself and my 3 brothers. I am the second from the left at the top. My brother Georgie, below is my brother Jesse, to the right is my brother Steve. And they were unable to get beyond the angst of their particularization, all 3 of them. All 3 of them died, either directly or indirectly, due to narcotics use. They couldn't do it. They didn't get a chance to go to university. They didn't get a chance to broaden their thought, experience, and action. My sister Vanessa and I did. And we're living testament to how important it is to people. I want to thank you very much for listening to me tonight. I really love the TEDx Forum, because what it does is it takes analysis and brings people together with it. It brings people together and it connects it to people. And that's really important, because thought, unless it's shared, isn't really knowledge. And if you don't connect it to people, it's not meaningful. I want to thank you. Love to you all. Take care.